You might recognize him as arguably the best dunker of his generation. Well, actually, that argument is tough, considering there's so many great dunkers of his era. While Jay Rich was not as big of a name as someone like Vince Carter, his show of skill, athleticism, and flair was certainly unique. The flashy extravagance of Jason Richardson would always be put on full display in the slam dunk contests, where he would win in back-to-back years, 2002 and 2003. However, not many people are aware of how good he was as a player. Whenever somebody develops a reputation for being a fantastic dunker, every other aspect of his game gets hidden in the shadows. That's mainly because we've had so many slam dunk champions who simply weren't that good in actual basketball games. Guys that come to mind are Jeremy Evans, or Derrick Jones Jr., or Fred Jones. They all won the slam dunk contests, but in the actual games, they're not that good. However, that was not the case with Richardson. How's it going, folks? My name's Andy, and today, let's talk about the career of Jason Richardson. Besides excelling in the dunk contest, how good was he on the court? What made him unique and special compared to other shooting guards of his era? The 2001 NBA draft class has become quite forgotten over the years. It's known as primarily the draft of Kwame Brown, the first time in history a high schooler got drafted with the first pick. He became recognized more for his failures. But going down a few more spots, with the 5th pick, the Golden State Warriors took Jason Richardson, a sophomore out of Michigan State who showed a lot of promise, mainly his quickness and athleticism, both of which stood out. In fact, his draft day comparison was Vince Carter. That was a ton of weight on his shoulders, just to be compared to Vinsanity. But it wasn't a bad comparison, actually. By the end of his career, it turned out to be a very good comparison, because both players had similar playstyles. So, what exactly was so special about Jay Rich? Well, he came into the league during an era where everything was super slow. The pace of the game in the early 2000s was excruciatingly slow. Offenses were inefficient because teams would just throw the ball to their superstar and let them ISO for like half the game. The long two was a staple in every team's game plan, despite being the most inefficient shot. This was the trend around the league. But Jay Rich was not like that. Immediately when he came in, what stood out was not just his athleticism, but his ability to shoot threes. In his sophomore year, he averaged over 15 points, shooting 37% from 3 on over 4 attempts per game. Back then, that was very good. Not only that, but his ability to finish at the rim was simply ridiculous. As a 22-year-old, he finished 66% of his shots there. In the 2002-03 season, he shot a higher percentage at the rim than Kobe, than T-Mac, and Vince Carter, the marquee wing players of that era who were all in their primes. And the thing is, Jay Rich maintained both his three-point percentage and his percentage at the rim for his entire career. That's what made him stand out. This combination of sharpshooting and relentless finishing made him an absolute beast on offense. Through the next few years in Golden State, Jay Rich bumped up his numbers even further. His career high came in the 2005-06 campaign, where he averaged over 23 points a game, 38% from 3 on over 6 attempts, and improved his playmaking, becoming an all-around threat. Defensively, he was decent when he put in the effort, although that wasn't as frequent as his team hoped. Overall, he was a pushover on that end, lackadaisical, and he wasn't using his quickness to his advantage as often as he should have. He got a lot of criticism for it, and he was part of the reason why the Warriors were always in the bottom half of the league in defensive rating. Other guards would just blow right by him quite easily. In his 6 seasons with Golden State, the Warriors only made the playoffs once. That was in 2007. It was a fantastic run, an incredible underdog story from the entire Warriors team as they knocked out the first-seeded Dallas Mavericks in the first round. While it was primarily Baron Davis under the spotlight, J. Rich came up huge in the series, averaging nearly 20 points and 7 rebounds on great efficiency. Considering that he was struggling with injuries all season, this was great news for his recovery, and it was a good sign for the future. Except his future would not be with the Warriors. Unfortunately, the organization did not think that highly of him. Shortly after their playoff run ended, the team traded him away to the Charlotte Bobcats for the 8th overall pick of the '07 draft, Brandon Wright. Theoretically, this should have worked out fine. The Warriors needed a big man, especially someone like Wright, who draft scouts predicted would become a fast, hyper-athletic pick-and-roll player, a defensive presence, and a transition player, to run alongside the rest of the team. Basically, he was supposed to develop into a player like DeAndre Jordan, but he turned out to be pretty mediocre. The Warriors swung for the fences and missed, and without Richardson, they couldn't make it back to the playoffs during this We Believe era. Here's an article from 2007, shortly after the trade. It had a good explanation for everything. Quote, "When Baron Davis came aboard 2 seasons ago, Richardson did what very few NBA stars are willing or able to do. He took a half step back, ceded go-to status graciously to Davis, and without the slightest complaint, became the perfect second banana. He did it for a reason a lot of NBA guys don't get, for the team." When the big makeover took place last season, when the Warriors took on an entirely new spirit and personality, outgoing and even outlandish, Richardson still fit right in, a quiet team leader. And now that the Warriors look like they've built themselves into a legit playoff team, Richardson will become a distant observer. The issue was, after Richardson was gone, they were no longer a legit playoff team. On the other hand, getting traded to the Charlotte Bobcats, a new expansion team, definitely did not help his winning situation. A couple years of great individual play yielded no results, and less than 2 years later, he found himself in Phoenix. At this stage of his career, he was reaching 30 years old, but he became the most complete version of himself. Playing alongside Steve Nash certainly helped, as he registered his most efficient shooting season. As the third leading scorer on the team, behind Nash and Stoudemire, he helped the Suns reach the Western Conference Finals. Perhaps this is a moment you all recognize. In Game 5, Richardson hit a crucial game-tying 3. The game was expected to go into overtime, but Ron Artest hit the game-winning layup, stunning the Suns as they ultimately lost in 6 games. This was a good run, but it was nearing the end of this era in Phoenix. Shortly after the loss, Amari Stoudemire joined the New York Knicks, and Richardson got traded at the deadline in the following year. This trade seemed very abrupt, and at first, there were rumors circling around that Richardson had slept with Nash's wife, who's now his ex-wife. Those were rumors spread by the media, and it hasn't been confirmed. A couple more years go by, and Richardson bounced around from Orlando to Philadelphia. He was actually involved in one of the biggest trades of the decade. In the summer of 2012, the Dwight Howard trade included many notable names: Andrew Bynum, Andre Iguodala, Dwight himself, and then on the side there was Richardson. He was primarily a throw-in. The Sixers' main guy they wanted was Andrew Bynum, who ended up playing a grand total of 0 games for the franchise. At least Richardson did play, but his career got cut short with knee surgery. Ultimately, he retired in 2015. So, how good was he actually? Well, he finished his NBA career with surprisingly 0 accolades under his name. No All-Star selections, no All-NBA nominations, no All-Defense, no championships, no anything, besides 2 slam dunk titles. In fact, he only made the playoffs in 4 seasons of his career. A lot of it had to do with playing on the Warriors early on. Despite averaging over 20 points a game multiple seasons, his teams were so bad that he wasn't being considered to be an all-star. Not so different than fellow Warrior Monte Ellis, who also did not make any all-star teams. With that being said, J. Rich made his mark as a very dynamic offensive player. While he was known as a dunker, he was also a sniper. For a shooting guard, it was so rare to see his combination of being an explosive athlete plus a great three-point shooter. It's usually one or the other, but he had both. As I mentioned earlier, the numbers don't lie. His finishing at the rim was ridiculous, even better than the premier shooting guards of his era. The ability to contort and control his body mid-air made him stand out among his peers. In my opinion, he was around a top 20 to top 25 player in the league during his prime. Among shooting guards, he was behind the more recognized players, but much better than your average player. If Richardson started off his NBA career playing for like the Celtics or Lakers, he'd be a lot more noticeable. From the eye test, anytime he was on the floor, he brought excitement to a struggling franchise, and always fed off the energy of the fans who always loved him and always cheered him on. He was certainly not a Gerald Green or a Desmond Mason, slam dunk champions who were average role players at best. J. Rich was much more than that, even though nowadays he's probably viewed mainly as a dunker. Nonetheless, he was as close to being a star as you can get, but just fell slightly short. Anyway, that's all, folks. That sums up the story of Jason Richardson. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section. Do you think he could have become an all-star in a different situation? Getting drafted to Golden State back then was pretty unfortunate, but he certainly had the talent to do so. Thank you everyone so much for watching. I hope y'all enjoyed the video, and as always, I'll see you next time. Peace.